Good evening, my dear. I am an ancient tree, and tonight you will fall asleep with me as I gently guide you toward rest. Before I tell you anything else, I want you to understand something about the nature of my age, about what it actually means to have been here for as long as I have been here. Because this understanding changes everything I'm about to share with you. I am old. Not old in the way that humans use the word. Not old in the way that means declining, diminishing, approaching an end. Old in the way that means accumulated, layered, built from the inside out, ring by ring, year by year, each layer containing within it the complete record of a full season lived. The oldest of my kind, the bristlecone pines of the American Southwest, the Fitzroy trees of Patagonia, the olive trees of the Mediterranean, have been living for thousands of years. Methuselah, a Great Basin bristlecone pine in the White Mountains of California, is over 4,800 years old. It was already ancient when the pyramids of Egypt were being built. It was already centuries old when Homer composed the Iliad. And I, though perhaps not quite Methuselah, have been here long enough to have witnessed more than your mind can comfortably hold. I have watched empires rise and dissolve. I have watched rivers change their courses. I have watched the same piece of sky go through every possible weather more times than I can count. And from all of this witnessing, from all these accumulated seasons of simply being here, I have developed a perspective that I want to offer you tonight as a gift for the sleep you are about to enter. Let me begin with something about myself that will genuinely surprise you. Something that the biologists discovered only in the last few decades, and that changed everything they thought they understood about what a tree actually is. I am not alone. I have never been alone. Despite appearing to stand separately, despite the space between me and the next tree, the visible distance that makes each of us look like an individual entity, I am part of a network so extensive and so sophisticated that the scientists who discovered it called it the Wood Wide Web. Beneath the soil, extending through the ground in threads so fine that a single teaspoon of forest soil can contain several miles of them, there is a network of mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi form partnerships with my roots, penetrating the root cells themselves, creating a union of plant and fungus that is one of the oldest biological relationships on Earth. Through this fungal network, I am connected to every other tree in my forest. Not loosely, not metaphorically, physically, chemically, informationally connected. And through this connection, we do things that your science is still only beginning to understand. We share sugar, the glucose I produce through photosynthesis, with the fungi in exchange for minerals and water that the fungi can access in the soil and I cannot reach with my roots alone. But we also share with each other. The forest ecologist Suzanne Simard discovered something extraordinary. Large, established trees, the trees she called mother trees, actively send carbon and nutrients through the mycorrhizal network to younger, smaller trees growing in their shade. Seedlings that would otherwise die, too small, too shaded, too resource-starved to survive on their own, receive sustenance from the network, from the community, from the older trees that have the resources to give, and that give them without any apparent reward. And when a tree is attacked by insects, by disease, by drought, it sends chemical signals through the network, warning signals that other trees receive and respond to by increasing their own defenses. The forest defends itself as a community. Alerts travel through the roots. No tree is left to face its challenges entirely alone. I tell you this remarkable, scientifically verified truth about the nature of forest life, because it contains teaching about your own life that I consider genuinely important. You are also part of a network. Not a fungal network, but the human equivalent. The web of relationships, community support that connects you to other people in ways that are mostly invisible until you need them or until you look closely. And just as the isolated tree, the tree cut off from the mycorrhizal network by disease or soil disturbance, struggles more than it would otherwise need to, the isolated person, the person who has, for whatever reason, been cut off from the network of genuine human connection, carries burdens that the network would otherwise help distribute. My first teaching for tonight: you do not need to carry everything alone. The network exists. It wants to support you, not out of obligation, but because the health of each is the health of all. And the tree that receives from the network is better able, in its time of fullness, to give back to it. Tonight, allow yourself to receive. Allow the quiet support of this moment, the warmth, the shelter, the safety, to reach you the way nutrients reach a seedling through the mycorrhizal threads. Silently, steadily, without your needing to earn or justify or manage the receiving. I want to tell you something now about how I experience time, about what time actually feels like from inside a life that spans millennia, because I think it will give you something genuinely useful for tonight. I do not experience urgency, not because nothing matters to me. Many things matter to me profoundly, but because my sense of time is so different from yours that the category of urgency simply does not arise in the way it arises for you. When you have been alive for 1,000 years, a single season, 3 months of spring or 6 months of a difficult drought, is less than 1/3 of a single percent of your life. The difficult drought is real. Its effects are real. But it is held within a context of such overwhelming abundance of time that the proportion of the difficulty to the whole is genuinely, structurally small. And the challenges that I have faced, the years when the rains did not come, the years when the insects stripped my leaves, the storms that broke major branches, the fires that scarred my bark, all of these are present in my body, written in my rings, visible in my scars, part of my complete and honest history. But they are not my identity. The drought year is one ring among hundreds. The storm scar is one feature of a trunk that has absorbed 1,000 other storms and continued growing. The difficult period is one chapter in a story so long that it genuinely cannot be defined by any single chapter, no matter how dramatic. And this is the perspective I want to offer you about whatever difficult thing you are carrying into this night. It is one ring, one chapter, one scar on a trunk that has absorbed more than this and will absorb more after this and will continue to grow and to shelter and to stand through all of it. The thing that feels enormous tonight is not larger than your life. It is one event within your life, one season in a story that is longer and more complete and more genuinely resilient than the midnight mind gives you credit for. Rest in this proportion tonight, not because the thing is unimportant, but because the you who will engage with it tomorrow is larger than the thing, has already survived more difficult things, will grow around this one too, the way I grow around every wound, incorporating it, scarring over it, continuing upward. Let me tell you now about the most surprising thing I have learned about my own sleeping. Because trees do sleep, and what science has discovered about this in the last decade is genuinely remarkable. For a long time, scientists assumed that trees simply stopped their active processes at night, that the absence of photosynthesis meant a kind of uniform dormancy, a waiting for the light. But in 2016, a team of researchers in Finland and Austria used precise laser scanning technology to measure the position of birch tree branches at different times of day and night. And what they found was extraordinary. Over the course of each night, the branches drooped by as much as 10 centimeters in larger trees, in a pattern consistent across all the trees they measured. And in the hours before dawn, the branches began to rise again, returning to their daytime position before the light had returned, before photosynthesis had resumed, before any of the usual explanations for branch movement could account for the change. The trees were relaxing at night, their branches drooping in a way that appeared, in the scientists' careful language, analogous to sleep. A genuine reduction in the water pressure that maintains branch posture during the day. A genuine nighttime settling into a slightly lower, slightly more relaxed position. And then rising again before dawn, anticipating the light, preparing for the day's work, not waiting for the signal, but already moving toward readiness before readiness was officially required. I tell you this because it reveals something about my nature that I want you to understand. The relaxation is genuine. The overnight letting down of the held posture, the release of the water pressure that keeps me extended and reaching through the day. This is not a failure. It is a necessary and intelligent part of the daily cycle of my existence. And your body does the same thing. The muscle tone that holds you upright through the day, the postural tension of the waking body, releases in sleep. The joints decompress, the muscles lengthen, the blood pressure drops, the heart rate slows. Every held thing releases, the way my branches release, into the lower, softer, more honest position of a body that is no longer performing wakefulness. This release is not diminishment. It is the most intelligent thing your body does. The deliberate, biological release of what has been held so that tomorrow it can be held again with genuine freshness, rather than the exhausted continuation of yesterday's tension. I want to share with you something about my rings, about what they contain and what they reveal. Because the information encoded in my growth rings is one of the most extraordinary natural archives that exists on Earth. Each ring represents 1 year of my life. A wide ring means abundant resources, good rainfall, warm temperatures, plenty of the conditions I need to grow quickly and well. A narrow ring means scarcity, drought, cold, competition. A year in which the conditions required more and provided less. Dendrochronologists, the scientists who study tree rings, can read my history in extraordinary detail. They can identify specific droughts, specific volcanic eruptions that temporarily cooled the climate, specific years of unusual warmth. They can cross-reference my rings with the rings of other trees in my region to build climate records extending back thousands of years. My body is a climate archive, an environmental record with a resolution of 1 year per data point, extending back across my entire life. And this archive is completely honest. It records what actually happened, not what I wished had happened, not what I feared would happen, but the actual, physical, biological record of how I responded to each year as it came. The narrow rings are not failures. They are the honest record of difficult years. Years in which I grew less because the conditions allowed less, and in which I allocated whatever resources were available with precisely the priority that survival required. And here is what I find most instructive about this. The narrow rings do not interrupt the sequence. They are still rings, still part of the continuous, unbroken record of a life that kept going through all of them, that never stopped laying down the evidence of its persistence. Your difficult years are also rings, part of the archive of a life that has continued laying down evidence of its persistence through every difficult season it has encountered. The narrow rings are there. They are real, but they are rings, evidence of survival, evidence of continuation, evidence that the difficult season did not stop the story. And tonight, this particular night, is becoming a ring, a small, specific addition to the record of a life that rested when resting was needed, that showed the wisdom to stop when stopping was right, that trusted the returning of the light. A ring that says, I was here, I rested, I continued. Here is something about the way I process carbon, the way I participate in one of the most important chemical cycles on Earth, that I want to offer you as a teaching about contribution. I absorb carbon dioxide from the air. This is well known, the basic fact of photosynthesis, the thing that makes the preservation of forests one of the most important tools available in the effort to stabilize the climate. But what is less well known, what I find genuinely remarkable about my own existence, is how much carbon I can contain. A large, ancient tree can store hundreds of tons of carbon in its wood. Carbon that has been removed from the atmosphere and locked in solid form for the entire duration of my life. And I do not just store what I have absorbed myself. When leaves fall from my branches, when branches fall from my trunk, they decompose in the soil beneath me, and their carbon becomes part of the soil carbon pool, a much larger and more stable form of storage than the carbon in the atmosphere. The soil beneath an ancient forest, built over centuries by the accumulated decomposition of leaves and branches, and eventually the trees themselves, contains enormous quantities of carbon that have been removed from the atmosphere through countless generations of trees doing what trees do. I am a net contributor to the stability of the system I inhabit. Not through intention, I do not choose to absorb carbon. I absorb it because this is what photosynthesis does. But the contribution is real, regardless of whether it is chosen. And this is a teaching about the nature of contribution that I want to offer you. The most significant contributions are often the ones made simply by doing what you do, fully, consistently, without drama, over a long enough period of time. The individual leaf absorbing carbon for a single season seems insignificant. The tree absorbing carbon for 1,000 seasons has locked away hundreds of tons. The individual act of genuine care, the specific, small, undramatic act of being a good person in the particular way that you are able to be, seems, on any given day, like very little. Over a lifetime, over decades of consistent, genuine, undramatic presence in the lives of the people you love, it becomes something that could not have been predicted from any single day's accounting. Do not measure yourself by today's ring. Measure yourself by the archive, by the accumulation, by the 100 tons of stable contribution that a life of consistent, genuine, unremarkable goodness builds over time. I want to tell you something now about the particular quality of the night from my perspective, about what the absence of light means for me, and how I use these hours, because it is quite different from what you might assume. When the light goes, when the sun sets and the photosynthesis stops, I do not simply wait. I shift. The metabolic priorities of my cells change completely. The processes that were subordinated to photosynthesis during the day, that were running at minimal capacity, so that maximum resources could be directed toward the capture and conversion of light. These processes now move to the center. Growth happens primarily at night. The elongation of cells, the actual physical expansion of wood and bark and root, occurs mostly in the dark hours, when the energy produced during the day can be directed toward building rather than toward capturing. The movement of water through my vascular system, the transpiration that is so energy intensive during the day, slows at night. My stomata, the pores in my leaves through which I breathe, close in the dark. The water loss stops. The conservation begins. Repair happens at night. The cellular damage that is inevitable during the day from the oxidative stress of intense photosynthesis, from the mechanical stress of wind and weight, is addressed during the dark hours, when the repair machinery of my cells can work without competition from the urgent demands of the waking day. In short, I grow at night, I repair at night, I conserve at night. The night is not the absence of my living. It is the part of my living that makes tomorrow's living possible. Your sleeping body does every one of these things. It grows or maintains while you sleep through the release of growth hormone that drives cellular repair and regeneration. It repairs the cellular damage of the day. It conserves resources, reducing its metabolic rate to allow the recovery of what activity has spent. And just as my night is not empty, just as the dark hours are some of my most productive, your sleep is not empty. It is the most productive thing your body does, the thing without which everything else becomes gradually less possible. The night is not the pause between the days, it is what the days are built from. Let me tell you about something that happens between my roots and the soil. Something that most people who walk beneath trees never think about. That I consider one of the most profound things about the nature of my existence. My roots reach across distances that would surprise you. The root system of a mature tree often extends 2 to 3 times beyond the drip line, the edge of the canopy above, reaching through the soil in directions that have nothing to do with where the tree appears to be. The visible tree, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, represents only a portion of what I am. The invisible tree, the root system spreading through the soil below, is often as large or larger than what you can see. And the roots are not passive. They do not simply absorb what is there. They actively explore, growing toward water, toward nutrients, following chemical gradients through the soil, responding to information from the fungal network about where resources are available and where they are not. The root tip, the growing point at the end of each root, is so information sensitive, so responsive to its environment, that some plant scientists have compared it to a simple brain. It detects gravity, moisture, chemical signals, mechanical obstacles. It makes decisions in the only way a root tip can make decisions about which direction to grow. And this invisible intelligence, this constant underground, unhurried exploration, happens primarily at night. Root growth, like stem growth, occurs predominantly during the dark hours. The roots explore when the tree is at rest, when the above-ground systems are conserving, when the resources can be directed downward and outward. The most important growth happens below the surface during the quiet hours, in the directions that no observer can see. And this is a teaching I want to offer you about the invisible growth that happens in your own life. The growth that cannot be measured by the metrics that the visible culture values. Your understanding deepens in the quiet, in the reflection, in the dreaming, in the integration that sleep provides. Your emotional resilience builds during the rest, when the overnight processing of difficult experiences reduces their charge and increases your capacity to carry them without being defined by them. The roots reach while you sleep. The parts of you that are becoming stronger, more stable, more capable, more genuinely rooted, are growing right now, in the directions that no one can see, toward the resources that tomorrow will require. Trust this invisible growth. It is happening. It has been happening every night of your life. Here is something about the way trees communicate, about the specific chemical language that trees use to signal each other through the air, that I find genuinely beautiful, and that contains advice about human communication that I have been refining for a very long time. When I am attacked, when insects begin to eat my leaves, I produce volatile organic compounds. These compounds, released into the air around me, serve multiple functions. Some of them directly repel or poison the insects. Some of them attract the insect's natural predators, the wasps or beetles or birds that feed on the creatures damaging me. And some of them travel on the breeze to the trees around me, carrying information. Something is attacking here. Prepare. The receiving trees, those that catch these volatile signals on their leaves, respond by increasing their own defensive chemistry, producing more tannins and other compounds that make their leaves less palatable, less easy to digest, less attractive as food. They do not wait to be attacked. They prepare based on the chemical warning from a neighbor before the threat has arrived. This is communication. Genuine, functional, life-preserving communication, conducted through the medium of chemistry and air, without sound, without language, without conscious intention, but real, effective, serving the community. And the teaching embedded in this, the most effective communication, is often not the loudest or the most deliberate. It is the most honest, the communication that carries genuine information, that is sent in response to genuine need, that reaches those who need to receive it, regardless of whether the sending was conscious. Your presence communicates, the quality of your attention, the genuine state of your inner life, the particular energy you bring into the spaces you inhabit and the relationships you tend. All of this is being received by the people around you, whether you intend it or not. And the most generous thing you can communicate to them, the signal that says, I am here, I am well, I am stable, requires that you actually be here, actually be well, actually be stable, which requires sleep, which requires rest, which requires the nightly return to the roots that makes the branches genuine and the signals honest. The well-rested person communicates steadiness, not performed steadiness, genuine steadiness. The chemical signal of a tree that has weathered what it has weathered and is still standing, still growing, still reaching. I want to speak to you now about something that most people find counterintuitive. Something about the relationship between competition and cooperation in the forest that I think offers some of the most valuable perspective I can give on human relationships and communities. It was assumed for a long time, by ecologists and foresters and the casual observer alike, that the forest is primarily a place of competition. Tree against tree, species against species, each organism attempting to capture more resources than the others: more light, more water, more soil nutrients, in a perpetual struggle for survival. And competition is real. I do not want to romanticize the forest into something it is not. The competition for light is genuine. It is why I grow tall, why my lower branches die as I get older, and the canopy closes above them. But the cooperation is equally real, and the research of the last few decades has revealed that the balance between them is quite different from what was assumed. Suzanne Simard's research showed something striking. In diverse forests with multiple species, the trees show less competition with different species than they do with their own. Douglas firs and birch trees in the forests of British Columbia appear to operate in something closer to mutualism, sharing resources through the mycorrhizal network in ways that benefit both. The birch, which is deciduous, which loses its leaves in winter, receives carbon from the fir during the summer, when the birch canopy shades the fir seedlings and the fir's photosynthesis is limited. The fir receives carbon from the birch in spring and fall, before and after the birch has leaves, when the fir has its full needle canopy and the birch is bare. They take turns feeding each other through the seasons of their different needs. This is not altruism in the human sense, but it is cooperation, real, functional, species-crossing cooperation that results in both trees surviving better together than either would alone. And the teaching for human life is this: the dichotomy between competition and cooperation is false. The most successful individuals, the most successful communities, are those that understand when to compete and when to cooperate, and that have the flexibility to do both, depending on what the situation requires. And the conditions of sleep, the context of genuine rest, are one of the places where this intelligence is restored. The exhausted person defaults to competition, defaults to scarcity thinking, defaults to the assumption that resources are limited and others are threats. The rested person can see the network, can recognize the cooperation opportunities, can hold both competition and cooperation simultaneously without collapsing into one or the other. The forest's intelligence, the capacity to compete where necessary and cooperate where beneficial, this intelligence requires the clarity of genuine rest. Let me tell you about something I experience in the deepest winter. In the months when the temperature drops below freezing and many trees enter dormancy, that I want to offer as a teaching about the seasons of human life. Dormancy is not death. This distinction is important, profoundly, practically important, because the culture you inhabit sometimes confuses them. When I enter dormancy, when the coldest months arrive and the growth and photosynthesis stop, I am not dying. I am protecting. The metabolic rate drops to a minimum. The water in my cells is managed carefully. The cells dehydrate slightly to reduce the risk of ice crystal damage. The sugars in my tissues increase, acting as a kind of antifreeze, lowering the freezing point of my cellular fluid. Everything that could be damaged by the cold is carefully, intelligently protected. And in this protected state, in this state of reduced function that looks from the outside like suspension, like absence, like the end, I am actually doing something essential. Many trees require a period of cold dormancy, a period of genuine low-temperature rest to reset their biology for the following growing season. Without sufficient cold dormancy, the spring bloom does not happen properly. The flowers do not set. The fruit does not form. The apparent inactivity of winter is the biological prerequisite of spring's abundance. And your life has seasons, periods of less external productivity, less visible growth, less obvious achievement, that are not failures of your nature, but the intelligent response of your nature to conditions that require protection and conservation rather than expansion and production. Do not measure the winter by summer's standards. The period of apparent dormancy, the season of rest, of quieter contribution, of doing less and being more, is not a deficiency in the story of your life. It is the period that makes the next spring possible. And sleep, every night, is a small dormancy, a miniature winter in which the systems quiet, the defenses activate, the resources conserve, and the biology prepares, very specifically, very intelligently, for the spring that arrives with each morning. I want to share something now about the relationship between trees and fire, about one of the most counterintuitive truths in all of forest ecology, because it contains a teaching about resilience that I consider among the most important I carry. Fire is not the enemy of the forest. I know this is counterintuitive. I know that fire feels like destruction, and it is destruction in the immediate, visible, dramatic sense. But many forest ecosystems are what ecologists call fire dependent, meaning that without periodic fire, the forest does not regenerate properly. The understory becomes too dense. The dead material accumulates. The nutrients that are locked in undecomposed wood remain inaccessible to the soil. Fire releases these nutrients in an instant. It clears the understory and allows light to reach the soil. It creates the open conditions in which the seedlings of fire-adapted species, including in many forests, me, can germinate and establish. Some of my kind, the giant sequoias, the lodgepole pines, produce cones that are sealed with resin and only open in the heat of fire. Their seeds cannot reach the soil until the fire has created the conditions their germination requires. They have evolved to need the fire, not to survive fire, but to require it, to be waiting for it, to hold their seeds in readiness for the very event that appears from the outside to be the most destructive thing that could happen. And this is one of the deepest teachings I carry about the difficult events of a human life. Some of the most important growth in a life is seeded by the fire. Not because suffering is good, not as a romantic claim that pain is necessary, but as an honest observation that some capacities, some depths of empathy, some qualities of understanding, some genuine rootedness emerge from experiences that felt, in the moment, like destruction. The seeds were there, sealed in resin, waiting for conditions to change. And when the fire came, however terrible, it opened what was waiting to be opened, released what was ready to be released, created the conditions for the germination that had been prepared for all along. You carry seeds like this, capacities sealed in resin, waiting for the right conditions to open. And sometimes the conditions are warmth and ease, and sometimes they are the fire. Sleep cannot open these seeds for you, but it can restore the resources you need to survive the fire without being destroyed by it, to endure until the conditions change, to be alive when the opening finally comes. I want to offer you now something about the specific quality of rest that I experience in the deepest winter, in the months of genuine dormancy, that I think is the most valuable thing I have to share about how to rest rather than merely stop. Genuine dormancy is not the same as inactivity. I am not simply frozen in place, waiting. I am actively maintaining, actively protecting what matters most, actively managing resources with extreme precision, actively preparing for the return of conditions that will allow growth to resume. The dormant tree is doing things that the growing tree cannot do, because the growing tree does not have the resources for them. The consolidation, the hardening, the deep maintenance, these require the quiet of dormancy. They cannot happen during the productive season. They require exactly the period that looks from the outside like nothing. And genuine sleep, the deep, full, uninterrupted sleep that the body is asking for, is the same quality of rest. Not passive, not empty. Actively maintaining, actively protecting, actively preparing. The brain, during deep sleep, does things it cannot do while awake, because wakefulness does not provide the conditions for this particular work. The glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance system, expands and flushes during deep sleep in a way that does not happen during waking. The pruning of unnecessary synaptic connections, a process essential for cognitive efficiency, occurs primarily during sleep. The immune surveillance, the body's patrol for and response to cellular damage, operates with greater efficiency at night. All of this requires the deep quiet of genuine sleep, the active, purposeful, biologically essential quiet. Not the stopping that is merely running out of energy, but the deliberate entering of the season in which the most important work happens beneath the surface, in the quiet, out of sight. I am settling now into the rhythm of my own nighttime quiet. The water pressure in my branches has already begun to drop. The nightly relaxation that the scientists measured happening as it always happens, as it has happened every night of my very long life. The stomata in my leaves have closed. The transpiration has stopped. The root tips are beginning their exploratory growth, reaching in the new directions that the night allows. And in the soil beneath me, in the fungal network that connects me to the community of the forest, the slow exchange continues. The resources that moved toward the younger trees today will return when they are older. The warning signals that protected the eastern edge of the forest will reach the western edge in time. The forest rests. Not all of it, not in the same way. The insects are active. Some of the fungi are most active at night. The owls are hunting in the canopy above me. But I rest in the particular way that my kind rests. Branches drooping slightly, processes slowing, resources conserving, while the underground intelligence continues its invisible, essential work. And you are doing the same. Your breathing has already slowed. The held tension of the day is releasing, the way my branches release, into the softer position of genuine rest. The underground work has begun. The roots are reaching. The repair is starting. The winter of this night is seeding the spring of tomorrow. I am here, 4,000 years old, still standing, still breathing, still laying down rings, entirely unhurried, entirely certain that the morning will come, that the light will return, that the roots will hold, that the network will sustain, that this particular night is one ring in a story that continues. And your story continues too, every ring of it, including this one, the ring that says, I rested, I trusted, I let the underground work happen, and I woke to find the forest still standing. Fall asleep with the feeling that you are held by something ancient and deeply rooted tonight, that the invisible work of restoration is already underway inside you, and that tomorrow you will wake with the particular steadiness of a tree that has rested through the night and is ready again for the light.